Well, it is so great to be up here after watching just some incredible panels today, because I've been itching for this conversation, not just because I'm so excited about the two Kevins that I'm about to talk to, the governor and the former councilman, although once a councilman, always a councilman. You're honorable and you're honorable. But because as I've been listening to the conversation today, what I wrote to ask you all seems incredibly ridiculous. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. The title of this panel is about making sausage and the art of making sausage. That old adage, I think it was Churchill, about making lawn sausage. I remember hearing that once in college and then going, what does that mean? And then I went to work on the Hill. And one of my first encounters in policymaking was working as a little old receptionist in the office of the congresswoman who represented my old home district, New Jersey, Marge Rockema. And I was promoted from receptionist to assistant to the assistant legislative assistant. And they gave me, this is going to date me, they gave me the issue of the MX missile. And the MX missile, for those who don't remember, was Star Wars. And it was the Reagan days. And my job was to collect all the pros and cons that were coming in by letter. We didn't really have email, by phone and letter. And then I had the opportunity to walk into Congresswoman Rockema's office and present my case. So I walked in with the stack of pro-MX missile voters, and the stack of anti, which was pretty small. And this is a pretty moderate district. I didn't really know politics. I'm an Italian immigrant's daughter. It didn't make much sense to me. So I was like, okay, so Marge, as we called her, I'd like to share the majority of your district supports President Reagan's MX missile proposal. And just as I was saying, she said, oh, that's interesting, okay. And what did they say? And I explained what they said. And just as she was about to say, okay, the phone rang. And it was Jim Brady, who was the president's counsel. And he got on the phone with her, and he made a couple of comments, and she said, okay, yeah, good, I'm good. My voters are with it. I'm excited. So now I'm excited. She walks off to the floor of the House, and she votes against it. And she walked back in the office later, and I said, Congresswoman, what happened? To which the chief of staff literally don't talk to the Congresswoman like that. It was the beginning of that. And I said, what? She said, well, Barney Frank put her arm around me, Congressman Barney Frank, and offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. And that was like the beginning, after all the academic stuff, when I thought I knew everything, that was the beginning of it all. So, Governor Stitt, with that as a backdrop.
It happens in my state all the time. So frustrating for all of us that are just trying to get things done. So
what do you do? What do you do when you've got someone who committed to doing something great? And so you recently enacted an incredibly path-breaking education freedom law in Oklahoma. It was hard to get even a charter school open in Oklahoma, 6 years ago. And all of a sudden you're doing this work, but it wasn't easy, I understand.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. But first off, I just want to thank all of you for advocating for parents and education freedom. And I know we've got leaders from around the country here, and the work you do is just amazing. So the Yass Foundation did an amazing job of helping us get it across the finish line in the state of Oklahoma. But a little bit about my story. The reason I got so passionate about education freedom and more school choice. I've got 6 children. My wife and I have been married for 25 years, and not all of our kids are different. And I've got one son that's dyslexic, that learns different than the others. And so, and then COVID hit when I'm governor. I'm the lucky governor that inherited COVID, right? It was hard for leaders, hard for governors all over the country. But, in education, so Tulsa Public Schools, most of our schools were open the entire time, but Tulsa closed down for 355 days. And I just hammered them every day. And I'm telling you, if any of you were governor and you had to hear from the moms and the dads that would call my office and they'd be like, Governor, what am I supposed to do? My first grader is not learning how to read right now on Zoom. and yet their neighbor across the street in this school district and this school district were all in school. And it just would break my heart. And I said, man, we have got to fix this. We've got to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So the first thing I did was I got open transfer done. So now we can create competition. And if it ever happens again, a parent can choose to put their kid in another school. So that's the first thing we did. And then the other thing this year, just super happy that we got across the finish line. And the way we did it was it's a refundable tax credit. And we can kind of go into the weeds, but we had to get a little clever, and we had to fund public education quite a bit, give teachers a huge pay raise, and so we'd been fiscally disciplined for my first 4 years. So we were able to do that, and at the same time, we had a different pot of money that now every single parent, regardless of their income, has a refundable tax credit up to $7,500 to take their kids to a school of their choice.
Just amazing. I'm going to come back a little bit to just a little more the intrigue behind you getting there. But Kevin Chavous, old friend, board member, president of Stride Learning, but we met when you were DC City Councilman, and you weren't always on the same page as you are today. And you were always about the kids. And you were always open-minded, and then you switched. You never switched. You kind of evolved. And then you had to fight some of the same forces that I just described and the governor just described.
You know what's interesting, Jeanne? Hearing that story with you and your early boss, the Congresswoman, the biggest non-surprise was you challenging the Congresswoman. That was that was the biggest non-surprise of the whole story. I think that a funny thing happened on my way to public service. I stayed true to who I am. I mean, and when I was first elected in D.C., and we had one of the most challenging public school districts in the country, and we were considering a charter school bill, and I was told by a lot of the senior members of the council, representatives of the union, that you need to do this. And someone said to me something that was pretty wise that has guided all of my thinking around what's best for kids. They said, the senior advisor of mine said, do you think this charter school bill will help a child or group of children learn? If the answer is yes, you should follow your conscience. If it's no, you should not. And that's why I voted yes. And I think that's been the guidepost that when I talk with other legislators, when I talk with leaders, similar to what the governor was saying, if you have more than one child, there are differences. So that a circle won't always fit in a square. You know that certain learning modalities work with some kids that won't work with others. So why should we as elected officials frustrate opportunities to expand options for the most challenging kids out there, or kids who are accelerated learners who need to be in a different environment, or kids with special needs? So this idea of voting your conscience and doing what's right for kids it's been the centerpiece of my career. And I also will say the first time I met Jeanne Allen for lunch, she challenged me like she challenged her former boss. I mean, she was very clear about reinforcing the fact that you say you want to help kids, don't you think this will help? And I think that's the way we should govern ourselves when we execute on policy or support policy that's being proposed to help kids.
But you took a beating from a lot of people in your party.
I took a lot of beating. In fact, I was just sharing with the governor because, we sort of trade war stories, while we were waiting. I said, well, they put garbage on my front yard, and he showed some scars, I showed some scars. But I do think that at the end of the day, what you have to do is you still have to be willing to communicate with people you disagree with. And that is in short supply in this country. In fact, we were talking about this as well. You've got people in the same party that won't talk with each other. So, if you're trying to execute on policy that benefits the children of this country, you sort of have to rise above the background noise, rise above the politics of the day, and insist on a communication. And I will say this, Jeanne, the example you gave with the Congresswoman, people will go south on you and they'll promise you and they'll vote with you and they won't, then they won't. But the only way to guard against that is to take a widespread approach to talk to as many people as possible. And I said this to the governor. One thing that I liked that he did in Oklahoma, which is a red state, he engaged Democrats around this bill. And so it makes a difference when you are leading people to talk to as many folks as possible, because you never know. Just by engaging them, you may pick up a vote or two you didn't expect that will benefit the kids.
And that was actually an incredibly pleasant surprise. Not knowing you well until then, not knowing a lot about your leadership, is hearing you say that you wanted to hear from all sides, and let's just bring them together. And you said, let's bring them together. You brought a group of people to the governor's mansion. We had some of the Yass Prize people there, thank you. But when we went to see you, you could have been like, yeah, I'm a governor, what the heck? Oh, yeah, that's nice to meet you, get out of here. You were like, bring them, I want to hear from them. And so you were challenged not just to get some Democratic votes, but where was that little conversation earlier today about rural Republicans? So let's get real about this issue, because we've got states like Texas right now having the same challenge. How did you help get rural Republicans not see it a threat to give other kids options?
Yeah, and we did. We had a great meeting there at the governor's mansion, and we had, legislators from both sides of the aisle. And I always remind our legislature and Oklahomans, every time I get a chance to talk to them, I said, listen, let Washington, D.C. play politics. We're all Oklahomans. We're just trying to be top 10 in everything that we do. And I come from the business world. I'd never been in politics at all, never ran for anything until I ran for governor and won in 2018 and just won my reelection. And so I have a governor's scorecard. And this is the way I led in my company is we put metrics together. And I believe that, in the private sector, I would say, hey, if this company can do it, we can do it when I'd get my management team together. If they're doing something, why can't we do it? And now as governor, I'm like, hey, if Texas is doing something, or Massachusetts, or Florida, or Tennessee, we can do it. Let's be top 10. So I track all these metrics, right? And in education, we're not top 10. And so we want to improve. And so that's kind of the overall message. But it's the teachers union, the rural Republicans and the superintendents. Sometimes, I don't know what it is like in your communities, but some of these rural folks will be like, Governor, my granddaddy was a zebra, I'm a zebra, and little Johnny's going to be a zebra. We go to the football game on Friday night. What is this nonsense you're talking about, other schools? But in Oklahoma, I tell people, listen, our goal is to get every kid college ready or career ready. And it's really not that difficult. What are the jobs of tomorrow? And then how are we training those kids for those jobs? And so one example that we got across the finish line, I went to Norman Public Schools, grew up in Norman, and we just put in an aviation school in Norman. And this aviation school now, if you're a junior in high school, you can go to this school and you become an aviation mechanic by the time you graduate. Or you can become a pilot. Well, aviation is a big deal in Oklahoma. We have Tinker Air Force Base, which is the largest maintenance and repair facility for the entire Air Force. We've got American Airlines in Tulsa with 5,000 employees. It's the largest maintenance and repair facility. The American Airlines executives told me that their starting salary for an A&P mechanic is $70,000 a year. Okay, I went home and told my son, I said, you're going to become an A&P mechanic. And but the point is, we don't need. I mean, about 52% of our kids go to higher ed, and that's great. We need more engineers, but we also need a lot of A&P mechanics in Oklahoma. And so that is what I consider education freedom and making these pathways for kids. And the rural community, I just said, listen, you don't have anything to worry about. If the money follows the student and your schools, the zebras are the greatest since sliced bread, then you have nothing to worry about. But if they don't get their kids college ready or career ready, or there's somebody that wants an aviation degree, or they want to become a pilot, or they want something that's not offered here, why is the government standing in their way? Let's give that parent a refundable tax credits, the way we did it, and to let them go to another school. And now we've got charter schools, which we can talk about, and we've got other private schools popping up and all over the state, which is just so exciting.
Kevin, the rural issue for you has a sort of a slightly different bent. Remember talking to you literally right in coming out of COVID, you were getting states calling Stride Learning, once K-12, the big bad online company, that all of a sudden became the most popular boy in town among states. And like, we have a lot of rural district leaders here. We have a lot in our movement. We have a lot of applicants. We have friends that do great things. And you were saying that even after COVID, they were like, well, let's work on vocational work. Let's do technical stuff. Let's do college, hybrid, technical, personalized, whatever, online and on ground. And they took it and ran with it. Are there actually more rural people that are innovative than we think? Is this kind of like maybe a tiger?
Yeah, I think
paper
so.
tiger?
And look, as the governor alluded to, COVID changed this country. It changed the world. And we're still reeling from it, but we've learned from it. And, at my company, we work with over 1,000 school districts. We have 8,000 to 10,000 teachers working with us. And we know that online learning is not for everyone, but it should be available for anyone. And we also know, and I've had people say this to me, that they were surprised at which one of their kids took to the online learning experience and which ones did not. And when you talk about educational freedom or expanding choice opportunities, I believe in the whole buffet line. I just don't want chicken fried steak. I don't like chicken fried steak, okay? But I want the whole menu line so that, if you're a parent, you can match it based on what's best for your children. And I also think that one of the lessons from COVID, and I think the governor has alluded to this in several conversations we've had, the learning lesson is that we need to be prepared for the next pandemic, the next flood, the next hurricane, the next shooting, the next natural disaster, the next whatever humans do that's crazy. We need to be prepared for it. And so governors and states need to be ready, and they need to have their school districts trained, their teachers trained to teach effectively online, because it is an art form, and our teachers weren't prepared for that. They need to have secure, hack-proof, equipment for the students, and they need to have curriculum that's digitized. And so I think this, when the governor talks about exciting the future, innovation and creativity isn't going to just be in urban America. In fact, I think rural America, with some of the natural resources that exist, can be a leader in executing on some of the exciting, innovative things in the future, and particularly when it comes to school to career, as the governor alluded to.
So let me just stay with you for a second before we go back to the governor. Let's talk about the sausage making. Give me one of your favorite or exemplary examples. Yeah, okay. It's a long day. One of your favorite examples of sausage making in your career.
Oh, well, let me say this. I shared this with the governor. So, I do trust you, Jeanne, but since it's recorded, I won't use the state or the governor's name. But there was an example where we were one vote away from a major school choice bill. The governor thought that the vote was already there because it was a conservative Republican who was a supporter in a rural part of the state. But we told him, that the governor, that you don't have this vote. Now, mind you, this was out in the Education Committee, and if it failed, we would not have expanded school choice in this state. So I said, well, let me talk to him, Governor. I talked to this person, and let me tell you what this legislator said. He said, yes, I supported this governor, and I support his politics. But similar to what Governor Stitt just said, he said, I will not vote for that bill because he lived in a town where there was one traffic light and there was a bridge that needed to be repaired, and the governor's people promised to repair the bridge, and they never did. And so I told the governor the next day they were out there repairing that bridge. 2 days later, we got the one vote we needed to expand school choice in the state. And so, it goes back to what I said about communication. The governor's people were counting on that vote and hadn't even talked to him. We had talked to everyone, and I knew that he was upset about that bridge, whereas people had to do a detour 2 or 3 miles to go to the main part of town. But the governor, being pragmatic as governors are, sent someone out there the next day. Got it done.
I've got a good one for you. So I'd just been elected governor 2019, or I was sworn in 2019, and I get there, and I don't know anything about politics. I don't even know the difference between the House and the Senate, right? I thought the legislature liked each other, okay? I thought, the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial. Well, the Senate and the House, they fight like cats and dogs. They hate each other, right? They just lob bombs back and forth between the two chambers. Well, the other thing is the governor did not have the authority to hire and fire the agency heads, right? They were all reported to different boards and commissions. And I'm a big football fan. We got any football fans in here? All right. I was at OU, Texas, by the way, on Saturday with Governor Abbott. So tomorrow he has to send me some barbecue and beer. So that's the bet we have every year. So we won that one. Anyway, I'm getting off. But I told Oklahomans, I said, listen, if you hire the new head football coach at the University of Oklahoma and you say, go win a national championship, you can't tell him, okay, you go win a national championship, go 14-0, but you can't hire your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator, your special teams coach. It's not going to work very well. I said, you have to give me the authority to hire and fire, not to be a bad guy, but just so we can align the vision of what we're trying to do with all these different state agencies, okay? And so the legislature, they didn't really want to give it to me, but we had to do a trade. And basically what I got for the authority to run the state government was I had to give up control of the Capitol, okay? So basically the doors and parking spots and who gets to assign parking spots. I'm like, that's the greatest trade in the world. And so I get to run state government, and they get to manage the Capitol building. So I have to get permission, I guess, from where I park my car. But I'm like, the security drops me off at the front anyway. I don't care where my car parks.
But this is not unusual, right? And this is the interesting thing. And you just brought something up. You knew that this was happening. You weren't just like, yeah, Joe, my chief of staff, go handle it. You're like, this is ridiculous. Let's get this fixed. Kevin, you found out that the dude was not going to vote for it because the bridge. How often do people not actually have that communication? Suddenly, you don't have what you need to get something done. Why is even, and I think it rains on all sides, blue, red, purple. Why are there so many state leaders and state lawmakers that don't dig in to understand how to get stuff done in that granular of a way? What is it?
Well, I think a couple things. One is, we live in a time now where the party caucuses dominate and rule so many of the decisions that are made in state government. And I say it's okay if you're a Democrat, Republican, and you follow what your party caucus, their platform is and all that. But you have to do your own homework. You've got to go talk to people, and you've got to extend yourself beyond what you're being told is the reality out there. And you've got to count your own votes. And the other thing you have to do, you have to know the tendencies of the members. I mean, when we got the charter school bill passed in D.C., we knew there was one of my colleagues who he would always vote with the person that spoke with him last. You know those kind of folks. I mean, he said, oh, yeah, I'm with you. And then someone else comes the other side. I'm with you. So we knew, and I had my staff standing outside his door right before the session started. And I said, did they go in there? Yeah, the union just went in there. Okay, well, let me know because we got to go up and vote, and I got to talk to him before he gets up there. And so there's this whole idea of making sure that you do your homework, know your members, know their tendencies. Don't just rely on what the party leadership tells you. If it's important enough to you, then you need to do your homework and figure out where other people are because you never know where the votes will come.
And you stuck with it, right? And so you pass a charter law that now has nearly 50% of students in the District of Columbia, which everyone thought was evil, but now you can't meet anyone that doesn't know someone or doesn't have a child that is or wanted to be in a charter school, right?
Yeah.
But every week since then, some 20 years, you had when you were doing that work in advocacy, and even now have to stay on it, right? So
you do.
What does that mean for Governor Stitt?
Can I just say one thing about that, because I'm very proud of the law. Let me tell you, people say, and I'm a Democrat, so this is a Democrat saying this now, competition matters, okay? It does matter. And so DC Public Schools is one of the few urban schools that saw an uptick in their enrollment. And you know what? They started to run ads and knock on doors in the hood saying, we can educate your kids too, because the charter school movement was growing. So this idea of, rising, all high tides rise all boats, there's no doubt about it. And DC is a textbook example, because if it weren't for the charter school movement in DC public schools wouldn't be where they are now.
And you have charters, now you have private schools that can rely on, parents who can rely on refundable tax credits to be able to attend schools that they couldn't afford before. You have districts, I've already heard, that are starting to say, wow, we better do something different. You've had online learning, right? Are you done? Is this it?
Well, that's what I'm here to learn from all the different startup schools here. So hopefully we want to invite all of you to Oklahoma. But, I think we capped the refundable tax credit last year, the legislature did, at $250 million. So my goal is I got to get that removed. But we need to get it across the finish line and get more of these parents, more schools popping up, more kids using these, more options, just seeing the innovation that happens. And I think it'll be hard for them to take it back away. But on the charter schools in Oklahoma, just real quick, Santa Fe South Charter School, it's in South Oklahoma City, probably 95% Hispanic students. There's 4,000 kids that go to this charter school. There's 1,000 on the waiting list. And what I remind people is nobody is forcing you to go to the school. You go to Oklahoma City Public Schools, but the parents are seeing a better outcome. And then Dove Science Academy, we've got one in Tulsa and one in Oklahoma City, 3,000 kids with 700 on the waiting list. Those are the type of options that we think are good and healthy. And then the stats on how many of those kids have been accepted into college versus their neighborhood school. And then back to Kevin's point, we're seeing it make everybody better. The competition is making it better. People then are starting to come back to those schools because they realize as they lose what is more local than a parent choosing where to send their kid to school. And then if the money follows the student in the purest form, that is the best way to do it. Because then that school is basically competing and trying to put a product out and trying to make sure every kid is college ready or career ready. I don't know how else to say it.
I love that when you said the money should follow the child. So one of the themes of this event, I heard it in the AI panel, I heard it in the more advocacy panel with Dr. Perry, I heard it with the alumni and I've heard it from some of you today, is you have to keep pushing yourself to the next level, right? And so, AI folks were like, well, 10 years ago it was adaptive learning, but it wasn't really adaptive. Now we got AI, and don't get too smitten by it all, right? Like you have to keep moving the needle. So I happened to be at a function the other night, and sitting next to a state senator from your state, so both will remain nameless. And I said, so why wasn't it full money following kids? Why was it a refundable tax credit? And she said, well, someone just walked in my office and said, well, Senator so-and-so, that's all we're going to do. And I said, okay. So I looked at her and I said, that's all you said? Like you weren't like, why and how do we get it? She's like, no, that's what we're going to do. So to push a little bit, was that your idea, the refundable tax credit? Can we not get like full funding following kids?
I mean, listen, I would love to, and I know what senators you're talking about. And I mean, I have the wounds in the back from sitting in that Senate caucus meeting as they just all beat me up, trying to get this across the finish line. I do off-site strategy sessions before we go into session. We try to come up with agreements. I ended up putting a 20% increase in public education, so we kept that funding by itself, and we set up this other pot of money over here that was the refundable tax credit that didn't touch the public funding, funding formula. But we would love to have just the pure 12,000 or 15,000 a student following the student. That's the purest form. Maybe that's something else later on. I did get Redbud funding done, which is more money to rural schools and more money to our charters, because charters can't bond, so they don't have the facility money that your public schools do, and they're having better outcomes with around $65,000, $7,000 a student versus $15,000 to $19,000 a student in your public schools, because when you look at all the bonding, and so we're trying to bring those gaps a little bit So they're in worse school districts, I mean, buildings, they don't have as good of facilities, but they're still, their outcomes are better. I mean, it's just that simple.
But did you see, Governor, how Jeanne pushed you? That's what she does. See, she just
I see that.
You see what she does now. We're friends, okay? We're friends. But it's a beautiful thing. The thing is, the work never ends. I mean, that's the bottom line. No matter what bill you get passed, no matter what great schools you put in the community, it never ends. And you know why? Because there are those who want to unpack what you have done. And so you always have to be vigilant to make sure you're paying attention to the legislative agenda and the new bills that are being introduced, because no matter where you are, no matter which state, there's always someone who wants to roll back some of the progress that has been made in education reform. And then there's also new things happening in the education world where even our local educators tell us, you know, this law that was passed 40 years ago doesn't apply to today's circumstances. So you have to continue to be vigilant. So I know, Governor, there's going to be more to be done. But the good news is the foundation you've set, I think, is pretty dynamic.
Exactly. So let's just end with just a couple of comments on transformational, our T in STOP. It's all transformational. Policy can be transformational, the work at the local level. But on the innovation note, for the ed tech folks in the room, for those who are running companies, for-profits, nonprofits, we're ecumenical about that at the Yass Prize and Foundation. How do you see technology playing a role across the board as we go into the future, beyond just basic online learning and stuff? How does it help transform learning institutions, government? What do we need to know to be great customers as well as providers to you both?
Well, I tell you what, first of all, don't be afraid of it. As I said, we work with 1,000 school districts, and we're really pushing AI in our company. And I've had conversations with school superintendents and school leaders, confidential conversations, where they're scared to death. And they haven't talked to their staff's scared to death. You remember when computers first came out and, you know, Microsoft or someone would give a school computers and they'd be in closets for like 4 or 5 years? I mean, that's kind of what is happening now with some of the new technological advances. So the first thing is, don't be afraid of it. And then if you're a leader, if you're a school leader, a superintendent, principal, what have you, it's incumbent on you to become somewhat knowledgeable about where things are in terms of these technological advances and where they may be going. And you need to bring in experts to talk to your staff, to train your staff. You know, we still, you know, for many of the school districts we work with, we still have to train them on, you know, how to use computers and all the usages that are available. So I think that that's really important. And then the other thing is, keep in mind the engagement piece. Because one of the biggest pluses with technology and its advances is it does a pretty good job of engaging kids that are otherwise not engaged. And if we're not up to speed with what is drawing kids to the technology, then we're missing an opportunity to keep those kids ready to learn and engage in a format that works for them. So those would be my advices.
Governor, last word.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, with the advancement of technology and AI, I just did an executive order to assign an AI director for every single one of my state agencies, look how we can go through our rules process, how we can be more innovative, how we can use this technology throughout state government to make government more efficient. So that's one thing. But technology also, when you think about rural Oklahoma and maybe a school district with 5 students, they're not going to have as many classes. They're not going to have as many opportunities for AP classes. So I would like us to see as how we can bring some of the more options to kids all over the state, right, and all over the country for that matter. The last thing, changing subjects real quick, is just to encourage you to get involved and just from the business community, because every state has different workforce needs. I mean, rural Oklahoma is different than downtown Oklahoma City or Philadelphia or Baltimore, and we're going to have different needs. So I love the innovation in our different school districts aligning the workforce, right? And the last thing, because education by itself, if you don't get in there and disrupt it a little bit, it doesn't change. And case in point, because this isn't my industry. I came from the banking world and the mortgage business. But so I get there, I first become governor, and the hospitals come to me. They're like, Governor, we need more nurses. And I'm like, no problem. I'm the governor. I can get you guys more nurses. So I go to the nursing colleges in Oklahoma, and I'm like, all right, guys, how many nurses are you kicking out a year? Because we need more nurses in all of our hospitals. And you know, as the CEO, sometimes you have to ask about 4 questions deep, or otherwise they just try to spin you in a circle, right? So I kept asking questions. How many applications do you get for nursing? This is OU Health Science Center. And I found out they were getting about 600 applicants a year. They were only approving or only accepting 250, okay? And in the business world, you would never turn away, you know, 400 customers that have the ability to pay and they want to do this and they want to become a nurse and we need the nurses. I'm like, and they were like, well, Governor, you just don't understand. There's student to faculty ratio. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Put a couple of extra desks in the classroom, right? And, oh, you just don't understand. So I just keep asking and probing, and I have to call Texas A&M and find out what their student to faculty ratio is for nursing. And I keep pushing them. One of my favorite press conferences that I had about 2 years ago is with the OU Health Science Center, the president of OU, is we had 550 nursing applicants, and they accepted all 550, okay? And so you've got to keep pushing, and you keep asking and aligning. And then also our career techs, you can design. They need the business community, the innovators, the people in this room going to the education community and pushing them with innovative ideas. And it starts with technology. It starts with all these things. But really, it's just aligning that and getting these kids ready for the workforce and letting them know that their future can be better than their present and giving them an opportunity to see what's possible for every single kid that may not have the parent involvement or may not know what's possible. Because we all know our journey, like who I looked up to business people in my church growing up, and we need to give these kids hopes and futures and let them know what's possible. And the American dream's alive and well in Oklahoma, I can tell you all that.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Governor Kevin Chavous. Give him a round of applause.